Where to start? I'm currently en route to court because the man my wife was having an affair with is suing me, even though I found him in my own home. I'm 29 and my wife is 27. The whole saga began when I got a call from an unknown number, and the stranger on the other end dropped the bombshell that my wife was cheating on me. This guy claimed that his co-worker had been boasting about all the women he'd been with, including a married woman he was currently seeing. He'd been showing off pictures of this woman on Facebook to him and some other colleagues. He remembered her name, looked her up on Facebook, and confirmed that she was indeed my wife, so he decided to give me a heads up. My work phone number is listed on my Facebook account, so he gave me a ring. I was on the road that day, driving from Houston to Baton Rouge to service a client's equipment. I was jamming out to my music when a call from an unknown number came through. I didn't recognize the number, but being in sales, I make it a point to answer every call. I assumed it was just another client, so I picked up the phone, and here's how the conversation unfolded. Me: "Hi there, this is Mr. James from XYZ Company." Stranger: "Is this Mr. James?" Me: "Yes, it's Mr. James speaking. What can I do for you?" Stranger: "Is your wife named Kate?" Me: Who's asking?" Stranger: "Just hear me out. I've got some crucial information about your wife. Either you confirm she's your wife, or I'll end the call." Me: All right. Yes, Kate is my wife." Stranger: "I need to tell you something about your wife. Whether you believe it or not, she's having an affair with a guy I work with, and he's been boasting about it over lunch, even showing off pictures of your wife." Me: I fell silent in shock. Stranger: Hello, are you still there?" Me: Yes, I'm here. Continue, please." Stranger: "There's this co-worker of mine, a guy I can't stand. He was bragging at lunch about how he's been with your wife. As a married man myself, I was disgusted. The details he shared were incredibly explicit and disturbing." The stranger continued, recounting an instance where my wife's lover was intimate with her and had her call me during their act. They carried on while she was on the phone with me, laughing behind my back. The stranger added, "I've been cheated on before, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone." I found a place to pull over on the side of the road, unsure if this was some sick joke or the real deal. The guy sounded genuinely upset and disturbed, so I felt inclined to take him seriously. Our phone conversation went on. Me: "How can I be sure you're not pulling my leg?" Stranger: "Well, your wife hits up Planet Fitness for workouts early in the morning and again in the evening, right?" Me: "Yeah, that's true." Stranger: "And she drives a blue station wagon, correct?" Me: "Yeah, she does. What's your name, by the way?" I'd like to know who I'm thanking for this eye-opening info. Stranger: "No need to know my name. Actually, you can thank me by keeping quiet about how you got this info. I could end up in hot water. I just thought you deserved to know. That's all." Before I could get another word in, the guy hung up. The number was blocked, so I couldn't ring him back. I sat in my car, taking deep breaths, trying to process the bombshell this mystery man had just dropped. He claimed my wife was messing around with a colleague, and he knew details about her gym schedule. He even mentioned something bizarre about my wife calling me while she was in the throes of passion with her lover. My wife had a health scare 6 months ago when a blood test revealed she was at risk for diabetes, gut issues, and hypertension. It really shook her up, so she made a major lifestyle overhaul, hitting the gym hard and making significant progress. She's shed 57 pounds in 6 months and now loves flaunting her new figure on social media. I work as a traveling field technician, covering parts of the southern half of the United States. So, I'm on the road 3 days a week. I've been at this gig for 3 years now, and it's really helped my wife and me climb out of debt. We're grateful that my folks handed over their house to us when they moved into a retirement community. The house is paid off, so we're living rent-free, just covering utilities. My work schedule hasn't been the best for our relationship, but we've made sacrifices given the financial stability my job brings. I was planning to quit in a year, so I could stick around more and start a family with my wife. We've been hitched for 6 years. No kids yet, but planning to start trying now that she's got her weight in check. But let's circle back to that call from the stranger about my wife's supposed affair. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to write it off as a prank and move on with my day. But something he said really got to me, about my wife calling me while she was with her lover. I've had a few odd calls from my wife on several occasions. She'd ring me up when she knew I was on the road and start chatting about random stuff. I was naive enough to think she was just missing me. When I'd ask why she was panting, she'd say she just hopped off the treadmill, which in hindsight was odd, because those weren't her usual workout times. She never used to call me when I was on the road, and suddenly, she's dialing me up to chat about nothing in particular. Being the attentive husband that I am, I'd always pick up, thinking she just wanted to hear my voice or that something urgent had come up. But then she'd just start rambling about this and that. After that call from the stranger, I decided to keep driving to my client's site. I had a few hours to get there, so I had plenty of time to sort through my thoughts. Given the recent revelations, which are starting to add up, I was 95% sure the stranger's story was legit. He mentioned what I now realize was a degrading call from my wife, orchestrated by her lover. I didn't call my wife to confront her about the affair after wrapping up my work at the client's facility. I checked into a hotel, as I usually do, since I couldn't drive back until the next day. In the evening, my wife rang me up, asking if I was coming home or staying at the hotel that night. Just a day ago, I would have thought she was calling to check in on me. Now I suspected she was calling to see if her lover could spend the night at our house. I was furious and couldn't hide it. I snapped at her that I'd already told her I was staying at the hotel, even though I hadn't. She seemed taken aback by my anger and asked if everything was all right. My wife is the kind of person who's extremely sensitive and will resort to tears to get her way. So she started sobbing, claiming I was being harsh with her for no apparent reason. Normally I'd apologize and that would be the end of it. But this time, I abruptly ended the call. She tried calling back, but I didn't pick up. That evening, I shot an email to my boss, requesting a couple of days off due to a family emergency. I didn't expect a response until the next day. Before hitting the sack that night, I checked my email and found a message from an anonymous account. It contained a picture of a man with his name typed beneath it, and a note stating that this was the man my wife was involved with. The sender had also written down the name of the guy, the supposed lover. I looked up my wife's alleged paramour on Facebook. I found pictures of him working out at the gym, the same one my wife frequents. He also seemed to enjoy flaunting his car in his posts. It was one of my favorite models, my dream car in fact, a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette. The car was a rebuild, and at this point, I'd trade my unfaithful wife for that car in a heartbeat if he was game. This guy was getting under my skin. I was green with envy. So, this was the kind of man my wife was after. He was more muscular and handsome than me. He was driving my dream car. And now, possibly, he was sleeping with the woman of my dreams. You could tell from his incessant car bragging that he was a total gym junkie who probably blew all his savings on a car to impress girls. Well, it seemed to be working for him. The next day, my boss couldn't approve my leave request because he couldn't find a replacement for me. So I had to drive to another client's location for work. My wife called me, and I was more composed this time. I told her I had a rough day, which was why I snapped at her. She was expecting an apology like always, but it never came. Eventually, I managed to get some time off work. I returned home and told my wife that I'd be hitting the road again for work. To cut a long story short, I rented a car so my wife wouldn't recognize it, and I tailed her to the gym in the morning. As she left the house, I trailed her discreetly. Her workout buddy turned out to be her lover, and I spotted her through the gym's glass window leaving with him. Then in the evening, thinking I was out of town, she invited him over to our house. This guy had the audacity to pull up in his '67 Chevy Corvette and park in my driveway as if he owned the joint. I toyed with the idea of storming in and catching them red-handed, but a more satisfying plan hatched in my mind. This arrogant jerk parked in my driveway as if he was the king of the castle. So, I decided to wreck his precious car. I swung a U-turn and headed to the nearby Walmart. I picked up a metal baseball bat and a kitchen knife. I returned, hoping his car was still parked in my driveway. Sure enough, he was planning on staying the night. As dawn was breaking, I started slashing his tires and wrecking his wheels. I smashed both headlights and taillights. I shattered the driver's and passenger side windows, both mirrors and the windshield. I then went to town on the driver's side door and the hood with my baseball bat. I was in the middle of trashing his trunk when he finally emerged from my house, where he'd likely been sleeping with my wife, to confront me. He must have heard the cacophony of his car being destroyed by my metal bat. He tried to take a swing at me, but I brandished the baseball bat, and he scampered back to my front porch. He picked up some rocks from the porch and started throwing them at me. That's when I noticed my wife had come outside and was screaming, while the neighbors had gathered to watch the impromptu demolition derby. One of the rocks the guy was hurling connected with me, and I bolted, taking cover behind a car parked on the street. He tried to make a getaway in his car, but the driver's side door was a total wreck and wouldn't budge. His once pristine '67 Chevy Corvette now looked like it belonged in a scrapyard, used for target practice. He eventually clambered in through the roof and tried to get the engine to turn over. As I emerged from my hiding spot, baseball bat in hand, ready to finish what I'd started, I didn't aim for him. I had no intention of destroying anyone, especially not over her. I was focused on wrecking his car, not causing him physical harm. The scene was pure pandemonium. My wife was sobbing, neighbors were gathering, and I was back to demolishing his car, even with him inside. Next thing I knew, he was on me, throwing punches. He was a lot bigger than me, so he had the upper hand. Suddenly the cops showed up and pulled him off me. He was cuffed and put in the back of a police cruiser. The police separated me and my wife to take our statements. I told them he was an intruder, and I was just trying to protect my wife. As I said this, I glanced at my wife. She looked puzzled at first, but then she backed up my story. The cops were clearly baffled by the whole situation. They could tell there was more to the story, but when they arrived, they saw him on top of me, attacking me, landing punches. So, there I was, in front of my own house, and he was the outsider, the one causing trouble. So, it's no surprise he was the one arrested and charged. He was the only one who didn't belong there. He was taken to the police station and released after 4 days. By then, the police had already towed his once gorgeous '67 Chevy Corvette to the scrapyard as potential evidence. When we got back inside the house, my wife had practically lost her voice from all the screaming and crying. In a hoarse whisper, she apologized, saying she was sorry and that it was a mistake. I told her to save her breath because we were heading for a divorce. I rang up my folks and filled them in on what had happened and that a divorce was on the horizon. But my parents tried to persuade me to work things out, especially since my mom was really close to my wife. I tried to explain what she had done, but they seemed to think therapy was the answer. My mom always said my wife reminded her of my younger sister who had passed away, and she had come to see my wife as her own daughter. I won't go into detail about how the affair strained my relationship with my mom and dad. My dad just didn't have the guts to stand up for me, or even for his own dignity. He sided with my wife because of my mom. To this day, I haven't had a word with my parents because they kept siding with her and wanted us to patch things up. I moved out of my parents' house since my wife wouldn't budge. Anyway, this week I got an email from the guy who spilled the beans about the affair. He told me that the other man got what was coming to him, and because he was a no-show at work for 3 days while he was in jail, he got fired. Apparently, pictures of his wrecked car were all over Facebook, and our story made the news. His co-workers were tagging him on Facebook with pictures of his ruined car just to rub it in. To top it all off, he served me papers yesterday, suing me for $90,000 for property damage, plus an extra $50,000 for job loss. I'll be getting a lawyer tomorrow, and I'm pretty sure I can countersue him for something too. Hopefully, if I get a chance, I'll keep you posted. As you can imagine, my life is a whirlwind right now, trying to juggle a looming divorce, living situation, stubborn parents, and a spiteful affair partner. When I first met Ava, she was the epitome of sweetness. I'd been head over heels for her for quite some time, but I was too chicken to make a move. When I finally did, it was like magic. Ava and I just clicked. Our chats were like a slice of heaven. She was the woman of my dreams, but I was a bit of a wallflower around the ladies. My buddy Joe knew how smitten I was with Ava. I couldn't shut up about her whenever we hung out. So he gave me a pep talk, told me to keep being the good guy I am, and Ava would fall for me in no time. And boy, was he right. As I started spending more time with Ava, taking her out on dates, catching a movie together, our connection deepened. When I finally popped the question, asking her to be my girlfriend, she couldn't resist. Back when Ava and I first met, we were working at different companies, and I was doing pretty well for myself financially. My Achilles heel was chatting up women. But once Ava became my girl, that worry was history. We were an item for 2 years, and I made it my mission to make her the happiest woman on the planet during that time. I did all this because I was head over heels in love with her, and just seeing her smile made my day. Also, before I popped the big question to Ava, she'd always mentioned that she wasn't into those public, flashy proposals with friends around or a big party. So I kept that in mind and invited her on a vacation to propose. During our 4-day getaway, I popped the question and she gave me a resounding yes. As soon as we got back home, we dove headfirst into planning our wedding. We tied the knot in a beautiful church ceremony, and everything was just perfect. After the wedding, my best bud Joseph suggested we upgrade to a larger apartment. Given that he'd been my ride or die since we were kids, I took his advice to heart. As luck would have it, we found a place just a few houses down from where he lived. It was perfect, just a 7-minute stroll from his place to ours. I didn't want to lose touch with my best friend just because I was now a married man. Ava was on board with the idea too. After we settled into our new digs, the bond between Joseph, Ava, and me grew even stronger. Joseph was still a bachelor, so he had the freedom to hang out late at our place or chill outside until we were all ready to call it a night. I was thrilled to see Ava warming up to Joseph. She wasn't as standoffish as she used to be. About a year into our marriage, my company had a massive layoff. Luckily, I landed a new job that paid even better. The only snag was that it required a lot of out-of-town travel, which meant less time with Ava and Joseph. But I made it a point to make up for lost time whenever I was in town. Since Ava didn't drive, I found myself in a pickle trying to figure out how to get her to work. We scoured the internet for potential drivers, but Ava wasn't comfortable with any of the candidates. Finally, I suggested Joseph, my best friend, since I trusted him implicitly. Ava thought it was a fantastic idea too. Honestly, I picked Joseph because I believed he could keep an eye on Ava for me when I was away. Little did I know I was setting the stage for a colossal blunder. I was aware that Joseph was a bit of a ladies' man and had a knack for charming women, but I never imagined he could betray me, shatter my trust, and obliterate our 25-year friendship. One Saturday, I came back to town, famished, and decided to swing by Joseph's place for a bite before heading home. I gave him a ring as I was rolling into town, and he mentioned he was whipping up something in the kitchen. That sealed the deal for me to drop by. Plus, I didn't want to head home just yet because Ava had mentioned she was out grocery shopping the last time we spoke. I figured by the time she got home and cooked, I'd be starving. So, stopping at Joseph's seemed like the best move. As we were chowing down, I noticed he was constantly tapping away on his phone. I figured he was probably texting some new girl he was trying to woo, so I didn't bother asking him about it. After we finished eating, Joseph tried to juggle clearing our plates while still clutching his phone. In the process, his phone slipped and hit the floor. As I bent down to pick it up for him, I saw that he'd been chatting with Ava the whole time. There was even a risque photo of her in the bathroom, a towel wrapped around her torso and her legs, freshly waxed, on full display. I was speechless, staring at the phone in disbelief. I didn't need a fortune teller to tell me Joseph and Ava were having an affair. I was shattered. I left his house immediately. When I got home, Ava was in the middle of cooking. I confronted her about Joseph. At first, she denied everything, even asking if I'd bumped my head. But when I told her that Joseph was HIV positive, she dropped the pan she was holding and spun around to face me. Ava asked if I was joking, but I told her Joseph had been living with HIV for quite some time. That's when she broke down and started crying. She confessed that she'd been with Joseph unprotected the night before. I already knew, but I wanted to hear her say it. I berated her for jeopardizing her health and betraying my trust. Then, I kicked her out of the house. We both got tested for HIV, and the results came back negative. But unfortunately for her, a few weeks later, she tested positive for herpes. By then, I was already working on our divorce papers, and we were officially divorced shortly after. I was dumbfounded that despite all I'd done for Joseph and Ava, they chose to betray me in such a way. So, I secured a restraining order against them and warned them to steer clear of me and my home. In the end, Ava and Joseph's relationship didn't last. Joseph was only out for his own satisfaction, while Ava thought she could deceive me and keep their affair under wraps. Eventually, she came crawling back, blaming Joseph for leading her astray. But I wasn't buying any of it. Ultimately, I had to leave the apartment because it was wreaking havoc on my mental health. This all happened a while back, but I'm grateful that I'm slowly healing from the heartbreak. Man, I'm really sorry you had to endure all of this. It must have been a gut punch to discover that the two people you trusted most could betray you so deeply. I'm also glad you took the right steps by cutting them both out of your life. They could have caused you even more harm. The fact that she had the audacity to beg for your forgiveness after shattering your trust and causing you such pain is just ridiculous. Now she's learning the hard way that you can't have your cake and eat it too. Once upon a time, my wife and I were the sweethearts of our high school. We were the couple everyone admired and envied. But our relationship hit a snag when she got mixed up with one of the popular guys I didn't care for. By mixed up, I mean I caught her in a lip lock with the guy right after school. The following year, I headed off to college and didn't see her again for quite some time. One night, I was out celebrating a buddy's upcoming wedding, and lo and behold, Nancy was there. At first, I didn't recognize her. It had been years after all. But when she approached my table and reintroduced herself, all those old feelings from high school came rushing back. She'd finished college and was now working in the same town as me. So, we decided to bury the hatchet that night and rekindle our friendship. I was still stinging from what Nancy had done, but a part of me yearned to have her back in my life. We swapped contact info that night and started reconnecting. From there, we began dating again. As we spent more time together, we crossed into intimate territory, and it became clear that our feelings for each other hadn't faded. I tried to keep my guard up, though, because I didn't want her to take me for granted again. But when she admitted that she still had feelings for me, we decided to make it official and rekindle our romance. We were an item for nearly a year before we tied the knot. Many of our high school buddies were taken aback by our reunion, but they made sure to show up for the wedding. The celebration was a blast, and the highlight was catching up with old friends we hadn't seen in ages. Nancy was quite the social butterfly and a total social media junkie. She earned her keep by promoting brands, reviewing products, and a whole lot more. So, besides her day job, she was raking in the dough online. In fact, she was out-earning me. But that didn't bother me, and it certainly didn't stop me from fulfilling my duties as a husband. I took care of the household expenses, spoiled her with gifts, and even bought her a car. We agreed to hold off on having kids for the first couple of years of our marriage. We wanted to make the most of our time together, reliving our teenage dreams. We'd always believed we'd end up together, and we did. I was a supportive husband, often stepping in to help create content for her Facebook page when she was swamped. Content creation came naturally to me, so I didn't mind her constant phone use, knowing it was part of her income stream. And when she was busy, I'd pitch in around the house, whip up a meal, do the grocery shopping, or, if we were both too tired to cook, I'd order takeout or we'd dine out. In my own unique way, I did everything within my power to ensure our marriage was enjoyable, comfortable, and that she still had the liberty to pursue her interests, just like she did before we tied the knot. As I juggled my professional and marital life to keep Nancy content, I was oblivious to the fact that she was having an affair with another social media influencer she'd met on Facebook. The kicker was, she'd mentioned this guy a few times, talking about his massive follower count, but I just assumed she was keeping tabs on her competition. One day, on my day off, I was lounging at home when I received a call from a towing company saying they were towing my car. Confused, I asked for the location and headed over, only to find out it was actually my wife's car. The company had contacted me since the car was registered in my name. I was dumbfounded to see her car there because her office was just a 30-minute drive from our house, while this location was an hour away. It didn't make sense since she was supposed to be at work at that time. I scanned the area for any signs of a women's boutique or a nail salon, but there were none in sight. She hadn't mentioned anything about going shopping when she left the house that morning. As I was trying to sort things out with the tow truck guys, I spotted my wife coming around a corner, her arm snugly wrapped around the waist of the influencer guy. The moment she caught sight of me, she gasped, clearly shocked to see her car being towed. My heart sank as their body language made it painfully obvious that they were more than just friends. Without waiting for an explanation, I started recording them on my phone. The guy kept stammering, "Sir, this isn't what it looks like. We were just hanging out. She's all yours." He seemed embarrassed as more and more people started to take notice. In a fit of anger and disappointment, I shouted at them, asking Nancy if she needed to sleep around to boost her influencer status. She didn't respond, just started crying as her car was towed away. I got in my car and drove off, leaving her behind. In my rearview mirror, I could see her arguing with the guy, but I knew our relationship was over. When I got home, I uploaded the video I'd taken to her Facebook page, tagging the other influencer. I knew the post would eventually be taken down, but not before a lot of people had seen and commented on it. When she finally came home, she tried to plead with me, but it was too late. I had already packed up her belongings and left them by the door. I told her to grab her stuff and get out, and she did. She clearly had a thing for high-profile guys, so she was free to go live that life. We ended up getting a divorce not long after. I kicked myself for being so naive. I had overlooked the warning signs, thinking she must have changed. But Nancy was always going to be Nancy. The fallout from our divorce hit her influencer career hard. Many of her clients terminated their contracts with her, and the influencer guy cut ties with her for damaging his reputation. But she got what she deserved. I've moved on now, and I've learned my lesson about ignoring red flags. Op, you were an incredible husband, and yet your ex-wife failed to appreciate your efforts to make her life comfortable. Not all men are as considerate as you, but she took what she had for granted. I'm glad you didn't let her back into your life. She would have just continued to hurt you. It's almost unbelievable that she cheated on you within the first year of marriage. I agree with you that she got what she deserved, and you've successfully extricated yourself from a toxic relationship. I'm confident you won't overlook red flags in the future. I wish you all the best.